Welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. If you like what we do and want to tip us, you can now do so directly to our PayPal. Check out the link in the description to this episode for more details. And as always, you can subscribe to our Patreon, where we share stories of life in Ukraine in times of war. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 241 days, Ukraine stands strong against the forces of the Russian invasion. Russia again conducted a series of missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities, targeting first of all energy infrastructure, reports Ukrainska Pravda. Yesterday evening, the General Staff of Ukraine informed that overall Russian troops launched 40 missiles and deployed 16 Iranian-made Shahed unmanned aerial vehicles. Ukrainian defenders managed to shoot down 20 cruise missiles and 11 unmanned aerial vehicles. Energy and critical infrastructure was damaged in 9 regions of Ukraine. For example, in the city of Lutsk, Volyn region, the Russian missile strike completely destroyed one of the city's energy facilities. Deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Kyrylo Tymoshenko, informed that yesterday's attack left almost 1.5 million Ukrainians across the country without electricity. Ukrenergo, the national energy regulator, assessed that the extent of damage caused to energy facilities yesterday may exceed that caused by the strikes on 10th and 11th October. As a result of yesterday's attacks, Ukraine was forced to turn off the electricity supply in Kyiv and 10 other regions. In his evening video address, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that emergency services are working to return power to the people as soon as possible. He thanked all those who are involved in this work. He stressed that Russia's claims that this terror against Ukraine's infrastructure and people can somehow slow down the active actions of the military or create some difficulties for Ukraine's defense are false. He added that Ukraine still does not have the technical ability to shoot down 100% of Russian missiles and attack drones, but will gradually come to this with the help of its partners. The president said that Ukraine is preparing the ground for extending the global sanctions policy to all Russian propagandists, so-called opinion leaders and show business representatives who support or justify war and terror against Ukraine. The Ukrainian Working Group on Sanctions against Russia prepared a basic list of all those involved in the spread of narratives without which Russian terror is impossible. Quote, "We must clearly evaluate such an informational and emotional component of terror. The Russian army loses and retreats on the battlefield, and therefore the results of terror against our civilian population and infrastructure are presented by Russian propaganda as a substitute for military victories." Unquote. Zelenskyy said that all those involved in propaganda should receive a full package of individual sanctions against them. Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that Ukraine can open negotiations with Russia only after the return of all its territories within the borders of 1991. But there will be no return to the level of bilateral relations with Russia that existed before the war, reports Ukrainska Pravda. In an interview with the Canadian channels CTV and CBC, the president expressed belief that in Russia there will be definitely a leadership with which Ukraine will communicate, but in the form of a dialogue, not ultimatums. At the same time, Zelenskyy has noted that the level of future relationship with Russia will also depend on whether Ukrainian lands will be returned by Moscow or whether Ukraine will return its land by itself and at what price. In the same interview to the Canadian media, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the world should warn Russia about a strike on the decision-making center on its territory if Moscow launches a nuclear strike on Kyiv's center where the government is situated. The president believes that in this situation it doesn't matter if Ukraine is a NATO country or not, as it is happening in Europe and no one is allowed to blackmail like a terrorist. Zelenskyy emphasized that Ukraine lives with a neighbor who doesn't understand anything except force. The General Staff of Ukraine informs that over the past 24 hours, units of the defense forces have repelled enemy attacks in the areas of 8 settlements in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Air Defense Forces of Ukraine managed to down Russian helicopter Ka-52. The Prosecutor General's office informed that in the result of Russian aggression against Ukraine, 430 children were killed, more than 818 were injured, reports Suspilne. The officials stressed that these figures are not final, as work is underway to establish the number of victims in the places of active hostilities in the temporarily occupied and liberated territories. The United Arab Emirates have announced plans to allocate $100 million for humanitarian aid to Ukraine, reports Interfax Ukraine. It is expected that these funds will be provided via the UN. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.